Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Michael. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Excellent.
Unlike our poor mayor, I understand you're not well.
That's all relative, I guess. Yeah, no, I'm not feeling very well tonight. I may end up, if the video turns off, it means I'm lying down.
We'll try and make it short.
Okay, so we are live streaming now.
Thank you very much, Amanda. One minute, just waiting for Councillor Jensen, I guess. Well, it's 6:30. We have quorum. Hopefully, Councillor Jensen will join us. I'm going to start the meeting. I'd like to call the City of Colwood Special Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, 16 February 2022 to order. We acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lagoon speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I'll do a roll call right now. Mayor Martin, just indicate here or present.
Yeah, good evening. I'm present.
Okay, Councillor Baxter.
I am here.
Councillor Day.
I'm here.
Councillor Jensen.
I'm here. Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Logan.
I'm here. Thanks, Doug.
And Councillor Parkinson.
I'm here as well.
Okay, firstly, are there any objections to the agenda as provided? Seeing none, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. So as part of your package, you received the minutes of the Committee of the Whole for February 7th, 2022, and the Special Committee of the Whole for February 8th, 2022. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, are there any objections to the adoption of the minutes? Seeing none, I will say they're adopted by unanimous consent. And there are, for item number 3, public participation, there is no one registered to speak tonight, so we'll move right on to item number 5. And I'll turn it over of new business, and I'll turn it over to Jen Hepting, our Director of Finance, for introduction. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you very much. Just before I get started, do you folks see the 2022 to 26 draft
good,
financial
Jen.
plan slides?
Yeah, we're good.
Great. Okay, so a quick update on where we are at in budget deliberations. Tonight's focus is on reviewing what we have proposed for both our special initiatives over the next 5 years, as well as our capital program over the next 5 years. March 1st, we will return with some of the updates that we discussed at the last budget deliberation meeting. And we will be introduced to the sewer, both the sewer operating, the sewer special initiatives, and the sewer capital budgets. That's next meeting at March 1st. So just to highlight tonight, no sewer related activity, either special or capital, is included in tonight's meeting plans. In addition, March 1st, we will be having a more in-depth discussion pertaining to our reserve balances, how we fund our reserves, and what the projections are looking like. You'll have noticed in tonight's agenda package, we did include summaries, forecasts on what those reserve balances are looking to be, but it really is our intention to get into that discussion March 1st. And then March 1st, we'll be looking for any recommendations on any proposed changes to this draft budget. At that point, council will have been introduced to the financial plan in its entirety. And so tonight, my intention really is, I certainly want to remind council where these initiatives or these capital budgets were previously approved, and where they may be either in progress or deferred. Some of this information is not new. You will have heard it during recent quarterly updates. And then for any new initiatives or new capital budgets, we will be sure to highlight that for you. So unless there's any questions or any items to clarify, I'll jump into initiatives. We do present these by service area. I see a hand up there.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. If you could just go back to your previous slide.
Absolutely.
So the 2022 ending balance that's forecast here of $4,126,000, $620, is that that is obviously must be assuming that all of the things that are presented thus far in the budget are go according to plan?
That is correct. And the opening 2022 balance, which I don't have on this slide deck, but is in your agenda package on page 26 of 46, or the first page within the capital draft capital plan. And that opening balance there, so including the surplus that we're talking about right now, that is preliminary. That has not been updated for what we anticipate will occur as a result of 2021 operations. The team is currently finalizing year-end accounting right now. And so those are some of the updates that we intend to both comment on at future budget deliberation meetings. And as well, as we finalize our year-end accounting, we will be bringing forward an update on the status of all works that are in progress at the end of this first quarter. So typically we return to council, it's usually around April, and we will provide status updates on our spend of both works that were in progress at year end, as well as any works that have initiated under the prior 5-year financial plan. And so I should take this moment to preface that tonight's intention is not intended to be a deep dive or an analysis on what has actualized, as the team is still finalizing those results. But tonight is intended to be the forward-looking, what is being proposed to be spent. And the majority of the activity, both within our capital budget and certainly within our special initiatives plan, are all works that were previously approved. And we'll provide comment on why they remain in our plan.
Okay, I'm trying to understand, that seems like a large surplus at over $4 million, and we're proposing, our forecast is for about $1 million last in 2023 and the same again in 2024. So I was just trying to understand the forecast. Why are we starting this high, and why is it reducing gradually over time?
Certainly, through the chair, I really appreciate that question. Big picture, we do not budget to fund a surplus. So legislation prevents cities from budgeting for a surplus or a deficit. As you have heard, and certainly in recent years, we have been generating a surplus. Why we generate a surplus? There are various factors at play. Oftentimes, staffing transition, hiring lags for almost all service areas. That's one of the larger contributors to a surplus. So when we look at our financial plan forward looking, you're not going to see that surplus plan to grow. We do factor in budget allocation of interest earnings, but beyond that, we do not budget for a surplus. We do, however, and we will highlight as we get into our capital program and into our initiatives, we do utilize our surplus. Both we have two, general operating and that surplus generated by our sewer operations, and that is treated as a source of funds. And so as we go through this budget review, we will highlight where we have proposed to utilize that surplus, and that is ultimately what's driving the reduction that you see with these projections over the next 5 years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, I have a question. This slide we're looking at right now, that appears in my materials for item 5.2. Is that deliberate?
Thank you through the chair. This reserve and other funding source projections, it's relevant to both our special initiatives and
Okay.
our capital budget. In the agenda package before you tonight, we have brought forth these budget updates standalone. There was two separate attachments, one for the special initiatives as they're proposed and one for the capital works. Ultimately, these plans will get consolidated within our financial plan.
Right.
And these reserves and funding sources, they provide funding for both special initiative works and the capital program. So to be clear, these projections factor in spend in both areas, both those of special operating spend as well as our capital.
Thank you. Okay. And just a clarification on Councillor Day's question and your answer. The surplus general operating decreases over time because you don't budget to create more surplus, but it's still likely that there will be surplus from time to time for the reasons you stated before. So, you know, the surplus fund there won't necessarily drop the way you've shown, yes?
Through the chair, that is absolutely correct.
Okay.
And so as we projected at the third quarter, we are anticipating a surplus again this year. And so that will increase that opening balance. And then from a financial planning stance, we don't plan for it to increase, but then as the year progresses and as service delivery actualizes, we provide comment throughout the year. And then again at year end, we will have that clarity and that conclusion on how operations finalized for the year and whether or not a surplus or a deficit was generated.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple of questions myself, Jen, before we I have you proceed on. So I have the same comment as Councillor Day. I just think that's an inordinate amount of money under surplus general operating. Is that typical for a city to carry that type of surplus for, you know, for our, in comparison to our revenue? It just seems like a lot of money.
Thank you for that, Chair. I would hesitate to directly answer that question, whether or not it's typical. I can certainly return with how this city's surplus has originated over years and what have been the factors that have driven it. You know, it's important to keep in mind we have introduced and we're continuing to introduce additional policy that provides specific direction on how surplus is to be allocated or perhaps restricted within a specific reserve. So you may recall the recent public art policy, that's one example. But the surplus that has originated, there's various reasons for it.
So that's okay. We can get into that after. But second question, I have just a generic question. the monies that we have in surplus, how is the interest accrued? Is it right back into the area that it comes from? Like, for example, you have $4 million, just over $4 million in surplus general operations. Does it accrue back into that again, or does it go is it shown someplace else in our balance sheet? How is that accrued?
Thank you. Great question. So I hope the simple answer is all of the interest that the city earns on all of our cash investments, operating savings, the various investments that we have in place, not all of that interest is recognized as revenue. So ultimately that interest, we proportionately allocate it based on the various fund and specifically reserve balances that are in place. So for example, the city's development cost charges, those cash contributions that we receive, they're deferred. So any interest earned on those is also deferred and allocated to those balances. So you don't see that interest come through revenue. What you do see come through is the interest that is allocated to general surplus or any other where we transfer to reserve balances. But to try and simply answer that question, these reserve balances, they all have cash reserves and they do all receive a proportionate allocation of our investment earnings.
Okay, last question.
Of course.
So we used some of our general, I believe in the budget discussions last week, you mentioned that we used just over $1 million to offset some of the potential tax hike that we could have had. I believe just over $1 million. I think that's where it came from. I believe special initiatives that $1 million. Anyways, how do we decide if it's, how much we take out of that, or can we take it out of that surplus operating for the following year to lessen the tax burden?
I'm not certain on the $1 million reference that you've made. This operating budget does not factor in any use of surplus to mitigate what would otherwise be a property tax increase. Recent meetings, I did receive a question on that. The last time that we did utilize surplus to mitigate a property tax increase was in 2020.
Right. That's I guess where my head was. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, in 2020, we did utilize some of the Rcmp surplus to provide funding for the increased policing services at that time. And ultimately, we didn't actualize the use of that surplus in that instance. And as I've mentioned at a previous meeting, in essence, what that does is simply defers the property tax increase that is required to ensure sustainable funding.
Right. I understood that. Okay, thanks very much, Jen. Councillor Parkinson.
Thanks, Chair. Just to be crystal clear, the surplus general operating budget is essentially the sum of surpluses since incorporation, isn't it? It's not. That's certainly not last year. Last year might be some surplus of a few bucks, but it's not that. So that's it. And Doug, I think maybe the $1 million you were talking about, was that the new taxation revenue?
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
Oh.
No,
Thank you.
So I remembered that. So click. Okay. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so we'll start with the special initiatives in our administration and corporate services areas. We are looking at a $50,000 budget to support this year's municipal election. We did anticipate this spend under our prior financial plan, although last year I don't believe we highlighted it as a standalone budget. So that is one of the initiatives that we are proposing we utilize our surplus funding for. In addition, we have one new proposed initiative in this area, and that is funding to support the scanning of a number of electronic records, ultimately to enable ease of accessibility of these records. And again, a second example of where we are proposing to utilize surplus. And I will pause for any questions, otherwise I will continue on.
I don't see any hands, Jen, so please, Councillor Day, pardon me, Councillor Day.
Sorry, I just didn't hear an answer to Councillor Parkinson's question about the surplus, that it was gained cumulatively over the years. I thought that each year when we looked at the surplus, we did allocate an amount to specific reserve funds. Is that not what we do?
Through the chair, thank you for seeking clarification, Councillor Day. It's a bit of both. So that surplus balance, both our general surplus and our sewer operating surplus, it is absolutely the cumulative effect of surpluses since inception. It's just the accumulation year after year. But you are absolutely correct. The city has a number of policies and or bylaws that provide clear direction on specific activity. So for example, the St. John's Church Reserve, any surplus that originates in that service area. So as a result of rental income exceeding the direct costs associated with that facility, we are directed to set that surplus aside specifically to that reserve. Council recently endorsed a public art policy that will see if we trigger a surplus in excess of $50,000, a general surplus, that will be set aside. So that's a new policy. So we'll start to see that take effect in the future. We have provided and received specific direction surpluses pertaining to the policing budgets. So in previous years where we have had those budgets and we've, budgeted for full strength, and strength has, historically is always actualized below that full authorized strength. Again, we've treated that surplus specifically, and with council resolution, it has gone into a specific Rcmp reserve. So you're absolutely correct. There's certainly some portion of the surplus that is treated and allocated in accordance with policy or city bylaw. That being said, it's not uncommon, and if my memory serves me, at least in the last 5 years plus, we have had a general surplus originate.
Yeah, and I was just curious about that, if maybe at some point in our budget discussions, maybe we could look at those policies about specific reserve funds, just not because I'm seeking to change anything necessarily, but I would assume that everything that we budget for is necessary. And quite often projects I'm aware of haven't realized because either, we weren't able to find a contractor to perform the works, or many reasons why we simply couldn't get it done in a particular year. And I see that we have carried forward a number of projects into the next year, this year. So I just think council might benefit from looking at those policies at some point in time when it fits in your schedule. But to look at that and determine, because there is so much, inflation is a big buzzword this year, but it's certainly true. And I've certainly heard comments more than once this year about we need to hurry up and get these things done before they cost, 30% more.
Okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Parkinson.
Apologies, Jen. Jen, I see you got the second and third item on your list up there, but you didn't talk about corporate contingency. And I think I asked this question last year, so, slap me for making you say it twice. The corporate contingency, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Is that for things that come up that aren't in the budget, just so there's a little bit of money there to cover it? Or is that if any of the other projects on this list go over budget, that's to cover that. So just so that, you know, there isn't a big foo-for-all about going back to council for minor budget increases. What is the corporate contingency used for?
Certainly, through the chair. I excluded the corporate contingency on this slide because it really is not an initiative. That being said, ultimately, our financial plan gives us the authority to spend. And we have prepared a financial plan in recent years, and we continue to do so, that allocates $150,000 annually in the event contingency is required. Could this contingency be utilized for an initiative that goes over budget or a capital works that goes over budget? No, not without council resolution. So as we've stated previously, and I will reiterate tonight, the intention is that corporate contingency is to only be used at the resolve of council. But we do factor in that amount annually, and it is funded through our general operating surplus, so that should an event or an unanticipated need arrive, we have the authority under our financial plan bylaw to make that spend, but only with council resolution on this specific need for that contingency. So to be clear, we do not plan utilization of that contingency.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I guess the question is, if council went ahead and authorized some new work and that line item wasn't there, presumably it would still come out of a reserve somewhere, or would we be told to just wait till the next year to put it in the budget?
Good question. It's not uncommon that financial plan bylaws receive amendments throughout the year. So last year, for example, I believe we had 1, if not 2 amendments to our financial plan bylaw. So if we did not have that contingency line item, or even if we did, just to provide that clarity for the public on the use of funds, we would simply return to council with a proposed financial plan amendment, perhaps change in scope of a project that brings the budget in excess, or introduction of a project that was not considered, you know, at this time of year on compilation of the budget, and we would amend the financial plan to enable that spend.
Thank you. Sorry to ask the same question twice.
Okay. Councillor Jensen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just struggling here a bit. We're so far afield. I'm looking at my document. I'm looking at the screen, and I can't figure out exactly what we're talking about here. And I just wonder if we can stick to the agenda and we can get a little deeper into this so I can actually see the budget and hear what the numbers are. I believe some of these questions could easily be answered through an email correspondence with our financial department here. And I just wonder if we can move along. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
And through the chair, to provide clarity, if you have a printed package, we're on page 16 of 46. That's the overview of the special initiatives. And specifically, we're just finalizing our discussion on the administration and corporate services initiatives, page 3 of 10 of the first attachment on tonight's agenda.
Right.
So now moving into communications service area. All of the special initiatives that are before you tonight in this area were all previously approved. And so just a quick update, Household Prosperity Census and Survey. This initiative is in progress. The events plan was an initiative that was deferred to this year. Neighborhood wayfinding in progress. We are near completion. We are anticipating that we will exceed the initial budget that was approved for neighborhood wayfinding. We disclosed this at the third quarter last year, and we were utilizing some of our marketing campaign funding to help support move this initiative along. And pending approval and formalization of this wayfinding strategy, the city will then be in a better position to establish a capital budget to support the implementation of this strategy. volunteer coordination plan. This initiative is in progress. And then lastly, we did establish under last year's financial plan a 3-year marketing campaign. And so we are moving into this year with the remaining 2 years of that. And we have had some discussion. Right now, the marketing campaign, we've got it positioned as a special initiative. Administration, we have the expectation that as we progress, we will want to consider introducing this within our communications and our public relations core operating budget. And I'll pause for any questions on these initiatives.
Seeing none, please proceed, Jen.
Moving into HR, the compensation and structure review was an initiative that was approved last year and is in progress. And so this budget represents the carry forward funding that is required to complete these works. No new initiatives proposed in this area. Seeing no questions, I'll move along into fire rescue. This is the second area where we have what I would consider a second contingency budget. So prior year financial plan, we introduced a $50,000 contingency budget utilizing our COVID-19 Safe Restart grant. We did not utilize that contingency in 2021. As we moved into 22, we did increase our response efforts, and we implemented a night shift effective January 1st of this year. And we are utilizing this COVID-19 grant funding for that purpose. In addition, the city was the successful recipient of 2 provincial grants. Works were initiated last year, and those works under those 2 grants continue into this year. No new initiatives in this area.
No questions please go forward there, Jen.
So moving into building and bylaw, we have 1 new initiative proposed in this area, and that is to set aside $10,000 in funding to support our bylaw team, ultimately in what we're referring to as a Safe Routes initiative, to provide assistance in safe route planning. So perhaps increased education, increased signage, perhaps additional enforcement time, or some infrastructure solutions. And currently, we're particularly looking at the Dunsmir school area. And so this is a new works proposed for the city for 2022.
Okay, please proceed. Oh, no, Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Sorry, what could you just explain really quickly? Are we building bike lanes? Like, sorry, what are we getting for that 10,000?
Thank you, through the chair. Great question. And I see that our building and bylaw manager has put his hand up, so I will turn it over to Byron to provide further clarity.
Great. Mr. Grant.
Good evening, committee. Yeah, so what we did is the works were put down as planned, and we're trying to seek an improvement in the pattern with the safe use of the bike lanes, safe pickup and drop off locations. So ideally, we wouldn't spend any more money, but we're going to start with having a presence first. We put quite a bit of effort into education with parents in the drop-off areas, etc. So we're going to start with the bylaw presence first, and if that doesn't work, look at other initiatives.
So, sorry, Chair, may I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure, please.
So I appreciate that bylaw is not going to, or is going to make an attempt not to spend the money, but what is council allocating the $10,000 towards is, I guess, the question. I understand that we're not going to try and spend the money, but if we have to, what would that money be spent on?
Examples, thank you for the question, and through the chair. Examples I can think of would be if we don't see an improvement with the pattern with the bylaw presence, then we may look at solutions such as temporary protected bike lanes and delineators.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Please proceed, Jen.
So now we're moving into the area of community planning. And certainly this is where the bulk of our special initiative work lays. And so I'll start by highlighting the majority of the initiatives in this area, with the exception of, I believe, 4, are all initiatives that have either been previously approved, and the majority of those are in progress. So we'll start with the land use bylaw update. This is an initiative that has been in progress through 2021. Moving into 2022, we're looking to include the remaining funding that's necessary for the signage regulation update work, as well as the remaining land use bylaw updates that are in progress. And then we'll be looking, excuse me, at an additional $30,000 spend. The sidewalk and bike lane review, we also referred to as the active transportation plan. And so we're continuing this work, and we are anticipating, so we had an original budget of $60,000. Total spend in this area, we're anticipating at about $65,500. And we're anticipating this work to continue into 2022 only. And the coastal adaptation plan, so in 2021, we had a $20,000 budget that provided some technical support for our Waterfront Coastal Process Committee. The 2022 budget is a new budget that is being proposed to fund development of policy, and as well development setbacks along our shoreline. And I will pause for any questions.
Mayor Martin.
Sorry, my apologies. Is this money that we're hoping, or is this work that we're hoping to do in-house, or is this money that's being allocated that will be used for consultants?
Great question. And I will look to our Director of Community Planning to clarify my initial statement here, but there's absolutely funding being proposed for the use of consultants.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair. Yes, our Director of Finance is correct. The total $60,000 that would be allocated to this line item would be to hire consultants to assist with this work.
Chair, may I just ask one more question? And this would be directed to our CAO. When we have significant budgets like $60,000 for this type of thing, is there not synergies where we could actually be hiring staff with that money that we're spending on consultants and actually have the work done in-house versus external? Or is the work so specific that the value proposition is better by having it through a consultant versus increasing our staff load?
Chair, may I address the question?
Please. Yes, please.
In every instance where staff are moving forward with a particular program of work, we would always look to establish whether or not it made more sense to move forward with the addition of internal workforce and or specialized services. In this particular area, I know that we have been actively using the very specialized resources of engineering teams who have expertise in this area. And so if this is work that it can be done in-house, we will endeavor to do so, but where we need specialized services such as coastal adaptation plan, we benefit strongly from finding the resources who have the skills.
Great, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. Thank you. Please proceed, Jen.
Thank you. So moving along, Colwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan, as we are aware, this initiative is well underway, and completion is anticipated early this year. So we are looking for a minor $10,000 budget to complete those works. And in total, we are anticipating, we may still come on the original budget that was established for this work, but as it stands right now, we are proposing an increase of $6,000 in the event that any final changes are desired of this plan. The demographic study is a multi-year recurring initiative. And ultimately, it's intended to review and update our demographic and land yield studies. And so we have the next one scheduled for this year. The low carbon resiliency plan is an initiative that is in progress, was previously approved last year, and the bulk of the work is expected to occur this year. And lastly, on this page, we have the economic development initiatives. So a number of initiatives and projects were established under our economic recovery plan, initially in 2020, further refined in 21. And so work specific in 2022 is primarily related to the update of the city's economic development strategy. And moving into 23, we also propose a land economics analysis. And I will pause for any questions on this series of initiatives.
Councillor Parkinson.
I have to confess, that's a lot of money, 123,000 this year and 135 next year for economic development in you know, a market that's just crazy. People are looking at land all over the place and jumping on it. I wonder about the value here versus, for instance, we had about $100,000 in Colwood marketing. If that doesn't do the same job or the job just as well. I don't know what the rest of council feels like, but to me, that's a lot of money that, you know, I think everybody says, well, the problem is finding the right piece of property or finding the people to execute a project, not so much looking for a place to do the business. So as I said, I'm concerned about that. We've got almost $300,000 in the next 2 years. I'm just not sure that the value is there. Listen to my other colleagues if anybody else has concerns.
Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, Councillor Parkinson, it sounded like you were thinking about economic development as just property development, but I believe that some of this is economic development is directed at keeping the existing businesses, which is definitely not property development, as well as attracting new businesses. If that's not the case, I would like to hear from staff what is the case.
Mr. Chair, happy to.
Yes, Mr. Barhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To address Councillor Baxter's question, the body of work that's being funded by this special initiative includes the implementation of the BRIA priorities. So there was 21 tactics that were proposed to council at the January 24th meeting. That work is flowing from the economic recovery plan and is proposed to be funded through a grant associated with COVID recovery. So there's a lot of work that's going to be carried out through this this line item as proposed that include things like promotion of Colwood to new businesses to attract investment, but also to assist with the expansion and retention of existing businesses as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have one quick question, Jen, and you know, when you give us the, I think on the March 1st meeting, are you going to, I think you had published earlier what each of, you know, when we look at the funding source, if it's gas tax revenue, future operating expenditure revenue, whatever, was there a set of guidelines on what you can spend money on? Like, I just find it kind of odd that economic development initiatives is being funded from the gas tax reserve. It just seems very odd to me. I would have tend to thought that would have been climate action sort of type of initiative. So
it's
So you have an
incredibly odd, because that is my error on this slide. So if you have a look on the published agenda package, you can see that the funding for the economic development continues to be utilization of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. It is not the gas tax reserve.
Okay, sorry.
But yes, and to provide further clarity, when we have the reserves discussion, it is another opportunity to provide an update on the specifics of, one, why we propose what funding sources we do propose in these financial plans, but also to specify what the restrictions are on our various funding sources.
That would be outstanding. Thanks very much, Jen. Please proceed.
So continuing along, the Clean BC rebate program, as you last heard from staff, this program was well received. We are continuing our support of this initiative into 2022. Inland floodplain mapping. This was previously approved under the reference environmental sustainability initiatives. So it is an initiative that has not yet started, but we do have scheduled for this year. Colwood Gateway Visioning. This is an initiative that is well underway, and we do anticipate that our total spend on this initiative will exceed what was originally approved. And we do anticipate that this work will be complete in 2022. Lastly, heritage strategy and a registry. And again, I believe I have an incorrect funding source on that item, but this is an initiative that is in progress, and we have, you'll note there that we've got an $85,000 budget proposed. It was previously approved at $45,000. We've increased the budget by $40,000 pending a successful Heritage BC grant application. So should we be successful in receiving that grant, the scope of this work will expand. But if we are not, this project will continue under the original budget amount.
Councillor Baxter.
I see on this slide we have inland floodplain mapping, but also elsewhere there's money for stormwater master plan update. Are those two things not the same thing?
Thank you through the chair. I will look to staff to provide further comment on the specifics of each of those initiatives. Or we will return.
Mr. Borhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the inland floodplain mapping initiative is specifically looking at drainage in the community as it relates to the flooding risk. So it's very much geared to defining floodplains and appropriate setbacks and potentially flood construction levels along our water courses. Now, of course, this is related to stormwater management, and we'll be looking for synergies between the two projects, but this is very much a project looking specifically at flooding risk and its mitigation.
Okay, but yes, I'm glad to hear that we will be cross-fertilizing between those two things. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, Jen.
So moving along, arts and culture initiatives. So these were previously approved and they are scheduled for 2022 and future years. So specifically, we're looking to develop a public art policy, utilization of some consultants to support that work. And we're also moving into 2024, looking to create an arts and culture plan for the city. The Cenotaph Remediation, I believe, is a line item we have spoken about for at least a year or two. These works are dependent on the receipt of grant funds. And should we receive those grant funds, it is most likely that we will see this activity actualize in our capital program. The Colwood Corners Public Realm Plan. This is an initiative that was previously approved. We are now proposing to defer this work until 2023, pending completion of the Colwood Gateway visioning exercise that is currently in progress. And lastly, the remaining budget under the Environmental Sustainability Initiative that was previously proposed, we're recommending that work be deferred to 2023. And that is to fund some options for forest management plans in the area.
No questions, please proceed, Jen.
Okay, so moving into the new initiatives that are being proposed. Latoria visioning exercise for the corridor between Veterans Memorial Parkway and Wishart Road. Housing assessment strategy. You recently heard from the team on this grant application. And so ultimately this initiative here is subject to a successful outcome of that application. Otherwise, this initiative will not proceed. We are proposing to set aside $30,000 in funding to support Indigenous protocol development. And lastly, as you recently heard and resolved earlier this week, $30,000 initiative budget to support the Community Arts Center feasibility works that we just discussed at the most recent council meeting. And I will pause. I do see a couple of questions here.
Yep. Councillor Baxter, followed by Councillor Day.
Okay, somewhere in these documents, I can't remember exactly where, we talk about the Latoria Road geotech/creek environmental. And then here we talk about the Latoria VMP to Wishart visioning. And those two are obviously interdependent. It sounds like you would do the first one I mentioned, and that would feed into the second. Can I again get assurance that we're not doing the same thing twice?
Mr. Borhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that question. Absolutely. We will be looking to stage the project such that we can benefit from the work that's now progressing on that other initiative that was looking at geotechnical and riparian issues relating primarily to Latoria Road, but obviously spilling over into the areas that would be looked at as potentially part of a new neighborhood plan that would be an outcome of this work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And my second question is on the housing assessment strategy. And I think it's just terminology confusing me. So when we talk about housing, assessment usually means the assessed value of your house. But this sounds more like it might be to do with housing affordability. Could I get clarification?
Mr.
Yes,
Borhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor Baxter, this is, I think we were trying to shrink that rather lengthy title we had for the grant-funded project in partnership with the Community Social Planning Council that was discussed at the last council meeting. So this would be the project looking at both housing poverty and housing prosperity in Colwood.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I did send a detailed email to staff seeking to understand what Councillor Baxter just asked about, the Latoria VMP to Wishart Road visioning project. There's a number of projects, including stormwater issues, including environmental issues, including floodplain issues in this area, that I'm just very concerned that we're doing a visioning project before we really understand what's under the surface of the road and the sidewalks and the properties adjacent to it.
Anyone from staff want to take that one on? Mr. Borhill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To reiterate some of the discourse that we've already had in relation to the visioning project needing to be timed such that it does benefit from the outputs of the other projects that are developing base information, we absolutely will be endeavoring to do that. The flood assessment work would also play into this, so we would be looking to, as I said, stage that appropriately. There is an impetus to coordinate the planning of this area because of development pressures and desires of property owners. So that's one of the big issues that's driving our desire to move on this in 2022.
Mr. Earl, do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Earl?
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi. And I believe members of our engineering team can also comment. Very much the work that we have done thus far with respect to geotechnical analysis under Latoria Road and environmental analysis of the creek is influencing both our desire to move forward with the visioning process and likely its outputs. We would very much use any information in our current stormwater master plan, in our current sanitary master plan, any current analysis that we have with respect to roadway culverts to help us guide the visioning. And we could certainly return to council in the first quarter of 22 and provide kind of a more detailed analysis of both the geotechnical and the environmental review of Latoria Creek, as it's my understanding that those are at or near complete. It is, as Mr. Borhill described, an acceleration of interest from property owners in that area that has spurned administration's desire to do neighborhood planning. It is our belief that much of the focus needs to be on the protection of Latoria Creek. And we've learned from the work we've done thus far on potential tactics, and those tactics would likely influence how these areas, should they develop, would best develop in a manner to protect both the creek and the need for municipal infrastructure moving forward. But if members of the engineering team can add further, I ask them to do so at this point.
I think I saw your hand, Trevor. Would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, through the chair, and to add to what Robert Earl has mentioned, we have completed the preliminary geotechnical assessment of Latoria Road in the area that we're discussing, and the environmental baseline assessment of the creek is forthcoming from our consultant. So to layer these two reports with the envisioning process of the development of these lands, we can definitely return to council with the findings of the geotechnical and the environmental baseline report that will be submitted to staff shortly.
Thank you very much. Councilor Baxter, does that answer your question, or would you like to make a motion of anything of any sort?
It's Councillor Day's question, actually.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Day. I'm very sorry.
And there is also, I don't have the email in front of me right now, but there's also stormwater for 2023. So I'm just concerned because this area was identified in the local area plan for South Colwood back in 1992. And there were designations that much of this land was unbuildable. So I'm just very concerned that we will be visioning something, spending $40,000 on that vision, and only later to find out what some of the other issues may be contributing to that area.
So, Councillor Day, would you like to make a motion of some sort then, or?
I would like to move that the visioning be delayed to 2023.
Okay. Did you get that, Amanda?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Mr. Earl?
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi. I can, just to provide additional commentary, administration is currently receiving applications from property owners along the Latour corridor between Wishart and VMP who are desirous to advance projects on their lands. Administration is also actively working to establish the design parameters by which Latoria Road and the associated infrastructure can be improved over time as envisioned in our development cost program. Administration is coming to the belief that the best way to protect Latoria Creek and to enhance its environmental capacity is to potentially create more room for it. And in order to do that, we think it's best to create a broader plan that goes beyond one property. And so a neighborhood style plan that would give administration the foundation upon which to stand when we speak with the development community or landowners about their desires for their lands, about a plan that, at the neighborhood scale that would protect the creek. So absent a visioning process, we're going to have to move kind of on a property by property basis as they come in the door. And we believe the best way to protect this area in the communities, for the community's benefit, is to do it collectively through a neighborhood plan. Administration would be most pleased to come back into chambers, present the geotechnical work, present the environmental work that we have thus far that has guided us to this position. Should council determine to move the visioning to 2023, we to some level are concerned it would lead to a piecemeal approach that might not benefit both the environment and the community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Earl. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I understand where staff are going with their recommendations, and I understand Councillor Day's concerns. Obviously, if we don't understand the extent of the soils that are difficult to build on, it's hard to create the right vision for the area. But having heard quite clearly that the geotech and the environmental works in this area are either done or nearly done and will come to council, if there was a valid concern that meant putting a brakes on a visioning exercise, I would think we could do it at that point. So I won't support the motion. I'm going to see how this plays out. I recognize the concerns. Councillor Day, I think you were probably on council when staff did more or less the same on the other side of the road, where there were all those properties sort of coming down to Latoria Road, and it was an internal city staff who created the concept of the one access at Besanton and the other properties being internally serviced from that road, which has worked out quite well, I think. So I would look forward to something very similar on the other side of the road. And I'm curious to see how all this plays out. But so I'm not willing to put a hold on this visioning exercise at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And seeing no other hands, I will call the question. All those that do not support the motion, please raise your hands. So it's defeated. Councillor Martin, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Logan, Councillor Parkinson, and Councillor Baxter and Councillor Kobayashi have voted it down. Cynthia.
Thank you. I will just point out to you, I do hope we come back and look at this further. I do understand the desire to have a plan, which we did have a plan in 1992. And in that plan in 1992, the lands on, as was described on this side of Besanton Way, were unbuildable. And if you want to see an example of that, look at the corner of Wishart and Latoria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's proceed, Jen.
All right, so moving into the area of engineering, a number of previously approved initiatives that are in progress. So starting with the engineering standards and specifications update to our current bylaw. We are anticipating completion within the original project budget of $70,000, but this work is very much in progress at this time. The Transportation Master Plan update. So we're proposing a $240,000 budget for 2022. This is in part carry forward budgets for works that are in progress. So specifically the validation exercise, the cross-section review that we've had undertaken for a little time now, but also an additional $150,000 earmarked to update the Transportation Master Plan, excuse me, and to support consulting services for staff in this area. We have reoccurring budgets as necessary to support the funding for orthographic photos for the city's GIS, and we do have $10,000 proposed for 2023. And I will pause for any questions, but to be clear, the Transportation Master Plan update is being funded through one of our reserves, our future operating expenditure reserve, and not a grant.
Okay, thanks very much, Jen. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just had a quick question for the Transportation Master Plan update. Will this provide us with ground truthed cross sections this time?
I will pause for comment from our engineering team.
I'm through the chair to Councillor Day. Councillor Day, the update to the Transportation Master Plan is intended to continue with our workshops with council for the other roads that were not originally brought forward to council. So I think there was originally chosen Wishart, VMP. We're looking to bring forward Souk, Kelly, et cetera, some of the other roads. And that would more envision a full road cross section for both traffic, but also the active transportation facilities through our ATP plan.
So will you be getting the actual road widths?
Through to Councillor Day, there is an idea to get potential right-of-way widths, which we will also be facilitating inside of our road standards with our subdivision servicing bylaw update as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, so we're in budget, so I won't belabor the point, but I do think, I would hope at the end of the Transportation Master Plan, we at least have some large scale plans of the area. I know the chosen road, we've talked about 2 lanes versus 3 lanes and where it fits. And I, for one, find just looking at cross sections to be not as satisfactory as looking at actual plans on how it might all fit together. So hopefully when we do go out for a Transportation Master Plan update, that work could be included at that time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parkinson. Please proceed, Jen.
As we've just spoken a little about the in-progress work related to the geotechnical review along Latoria Road and the environmental review, those works will be complete early this year, and we do anticipate that they will complete on budget. We've got a $15,000 budget proposed for traffic calming pilots. So this discussion certainly came about during the year last year, and we are proposing that we maintain some funding should the need arise to introduce or implement any pilot projects in any areas of the city based on feedback we receive. The Stormwater Master Plan update. Councillor Baxter commented on this earlier. So we did have this previously proposed for 2024 and 2025, and those budgets remain in this financial plan. So we did last complete our Stormwater Master Plan in 2018, and this is funding to initiate an update to that plan starting in 2024. And I will pause.
No questions, please proceed.
Okay, so moving into our last area, parks, trails, and recreation. So as we have, we've just received an update regarding our parks management plans. We are continuing with new parks management plans. So specifically this year, we're looking at the creation of a parks management plan for both Havenwood and Latoria Creek parks. The urban forest management plan. This was work that was originally approved in the 21 budget and has been deferred. The West Shore Parks and Recreation skate park contribution. We heard a bit of an update on the efforts that the West Shore Parks and Rec Society provided comment with their recent requisition budget update. So the city in previous years, we did commit a contribution towards this potential skate park that is planned. And so that commitment remains in our financial plan. And lastly, we did previously establish a $10,000 budget for a banners and pageantry plan. And that ultimately, when we establish our neighborhood wayfinding strategy, that will help inform this plan. And so those works have been deferred pending that strategy. And I will pause. I do see a question.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just where it says deferred in bold at the beginning, but then on the right, it says in 2022. So I'm just confused. Is it deferred or is it in the budget for this year?
Thank you, through the chair. Great question. So on this slide, we have previously approved initiatives. So specifically the urban forest management plan that was originally budgeted for 2021. Those works have been deferred. And so we are now looking at a 2022 budget for those works. Similarly, the banners and pageantry plan previously approved. The work did not initiate, it was deferred. And so we're looking to carry forward that budget. And we do anticipate those works this year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Please proceed, Jen.
And so with that, I'll move into new initiatives. The recent discussion and direction we received from council earlier this week, we are proposing to set aside some funding to support the compilation of a Parks DCC bylaw. In addition, as you recently heard, there is a Parks Canada initiative. And so we are expecting funding from Parks Canada, and this initiative here enables us to spend that funding to advance feasibility studies and planning for a potential national urban park in Colwood.
Seeing no hands, please proceed.
And so with that, we've completed our review of special initiatives.
I'm sorry, Chair. Chair. Sorry, I was having a hard time getting my hand up. Could we just go back to Parks Canada initiative, please, just for a moment, if that's all right, Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
So and maybe it's because they're giving money to us, but I do recall in previous years, we have budgeted where we were trying to give money to Parks Canada, specifically Fort Rod Hill, for Canada Day. And then the federal government said that they would not take money from the municipality for that. We don't have any money. We don't have any issues receiving this money for this initiative. There's no policy issues around that. Just confirming.
Through the chair, no policy issues. So should we receive this funding, we will be proceeding with the spend of that funding. But you are correct. Under the city's grant and aid program, we did receive some feedback some time ago from the federal government not to accept the city's grant and aid support for the Canada Day celebrations at Fort Rod Hill.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My apologies.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, so moving into our capital program summary. So in total, over the next 5 years, this budget proposes spend of approximately $50 million, primarily in the area of road infrastructure. But of course, we will go through each of our asset classes. So unlike special initiatives where we discuss this spend by service area, when we flip into our capital works, we talk about it by the type. So the road infrastructure, our facility or building infrastructure spend, and so on. So similarly, I will proceed and will of course pause for any questions. And I am now on that second attachment of tonight's agenda. And specifically, we're at page 28 of 46 or page 3 of 21 of that second attachment. We have a number of reoccurring road infrastructure capital programs. So starting with our paving program, and we fund our paving program through our Sustainable Infrastructure Reserve. This program was ultimately introduced with annual funding of $600,000. This year, we are proposing a budget of $734,000. That's a partial carry forward of some of last year's unspent, and the Public Works team has captured some of those works, additional works, into this year's intended work plan for this program. The Sidewalk and Bike Lane program, I have a couple of slides following this slide to provide us updates on the specific spend there, but we're continuing the implementation of sidewalk and bike lane infrastructure as has been previously directed by Council. And I will pause on this for a moment. We are proposing debt financing for both sidewalk and bike lane related capital works, as well as when we get into our facilities discussion to support our public works facility. In addition, we've commented previously about the anticipated spend related to the West Shore Rcmp detachment facility in Langford. We currently don't have any budget for the West Shore detachment facility incorporated into this plan, but that spend is anticipated. We expect to receive more clarity on that budget this year. And so I highlight those items because we are proposing debt financing. This was discussed briefly during last year's budget deliberations, but as we are now in a year where we are looking at debt financing, we will get more into the specifics of why the debt financing is being proposed at the upcoming March 1st meeting. And like I said, I will take a little bit more time. We can hold any questions on sidewalk and bike lane works, as I've got a couple more slides on that. Streetlight upgrades. We are looking to upgrade the LED streetlights in the Royal Bay area. This was work that was originally discussed during last year's budget deliberations and has been deferred to 2022. Similarly, we maintain funding for traffic signal controller upgrades, and our engineering team does have a work plan over a 5-year period. And those works that were initiated last year will ultimately actualize this year. And lastly, we do have bridge repairs and upgrades scheduled for the Esquimalt Lagoon Bridge. Similarly, this item previously discussed last year is underway, but we anticipate the works will actualize in 2022.
Councillor Parkinson.
I'm just wondering about how far ahead on the annual paving program people look. It looks like there's just a number as a placeholder there, and yet it's supposedly based on a condition assessment. Do they know at this point what roads are going to be done this year and what roads are going to be done next year, and or do they just sort of do it over the winter, see how much money they've got and go as far as it'll go?
Thank you, through the chair. Great question. We have disclosed the bulk of what is planned for 2022 and 23. That is on page 4 of 21. But we're looking at paving on Carger Terrace, Souk Road, Latoria Road, Carindale, Jacqueline, Fulton, Leadsham, Goldfinch, Ocean Boulevard, Goldstream Avenue, Stornoway, Hatley Drive, Sun Heights Drive, and Heatherbell Road. In terms of the specific areas of those roads, I don't have that information readily available. But to be clear, there absolutely is a work plan that Public Works has established. And
Great, as they should. So that's good. But again, it looks to me like, except for this year, and this year, I mean, it looks to me like there's a $600,000 placeholder, and then whatever wasn't spent last year is rolled into this year. And I guess I would assume that with a specific list of roads to work on, that the budgeting could be more accurate than it is.
And through the chair, and I do see our Public Works manager has raised his hand to comment, but just to provide some feedback on that comment, we didn't directly just roll forward the unspent placeholder budget from 22. The team did look at what is intended for this year. And so there was a slight, we did refine this year's budget, that 734. But I will turn it over to our Public Works
Mr. Boyle?
manager.
You're okay, there you go.
Unmuted. Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Parkinson, questions validated. The paving program has been just initiated. We have started this year on the pavement assessment, and going forward, we were concentrating on extending base life asphalts up until now, so problematic areas. Moving forward, we will continue now on the pavement assessment program. I believe there's 3 roads that we are tackling this year on that pavement index. I believe there's an initiative to actually do another pavement assessment because it should be done again. And then we hopefully will be able to stay on top of it. As for the carryover, the works were slated for last year, and actually, for whatever reason, contractor availability, it just did not get done. So those roads were carried over, and that's where you got the carryover from.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boyle. Anything more, Councillor Parkinson?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So moving into the specifics of what we have planned under our sidewalk and bike lane program. Currently, as you'll recall, March 2021, this administration received direction to proceed on, it was approximately 10 projects. And so we have design underway for these projects that you see before you. And in addition, the 2022 budget includes preliminary construction estimates, so Class D construction estimates. They do include a contingency factor, 40%. And then pending the finalization of the design work that is underway, we will return to council with an update, excuse me, on the refinement of these construction estimates. Some of these works, these active transportation related works, are included within our road DCC program. So specifically the Kelly Road sidewalk between Souk and Machosen, that portion is included within our road DCC program. Ben Homer Drive sidewalk between Painter Road and Machosen Road. Those works are scheduled for this year. Owens Road sidewalk, being referred to as Wishart School Dunsmir Safe School Route. Hagel Road sidewalk, as well a bikeway Galloping Goose Trail connection. And then lastly, we are initiating design work in the Machosen Road Hatley Drive intersection area, and that was previously discussed. In addition, we have 5 road areas that are slated for 2023. And the 2023 sidewalk and bike lane program budget reflects the Class D initial preliminary estimates for those areas. So we are looking at design work, finalizing the design work for the 5 areas that are slated for 2022, as well as design work for these 23 proposed works. And I will pause if there's any questions in this area.
Seeing nothing, please proceed, Jen.
Okay, so then moving along to previously approved road infrastructure works that are currently in progress. We have the intersection improvements, Latoria Road at Veterans Memorial Parkway. And I did want to highlight here, we did revise the project budget that has been published in this document based on a 2021 Class C estimate. An update is pending to this information. So we have just this week received a newer construction estimate, and so the team, we are reviewing that, and we will bring forward that update as soon as we can. I anticipate we'll get that in before we conclude these budget deliberations. But again, these are works that are underway, are included within the Road DCC program, and we are, in part, this is work between the city and Olympic View Developments. And so there is a developer cash contribution portion based on the base works that would have been required had we not proceeded with excess works, which is that of the double lane intersection. And I will pause. I do see a question.
Yes, Councillor Parkinson.
Jen, are we comparing apples to apples here with the estimates? I know that earlier you talked of Class D estimate, including a 40% contingency. Would the 4.11 million Class C estimate also have a similar contingency?
Thank you for that question, and through the chair. With this project here, we are currently refining our review of the estimates. So there is a contingency factor, but rather than speak out of turn, I will return with specifics on this project.
I'll be patient.
Thank you.
Jen.
Yep.
Allendale Road Works and Services, well underway, in progress. This project, we are anticipating to complete the works this year. We are anticipating to complete the works on or slightly under budget. These works were tendered, as you know, last spring. And we are, again, this is an area where there is a partial private property cash contribution towards some of the works that are outside that of the city's responsibility. Moving into new road infrastructure works, we've had recent conversations about both of these when we brought forth our 2022 Road DCC project prioritization update. And so specifically, we will be seeing intersection improvements, Machosen at Latoria Road. These works will be administered by Gablecraft and Seacliff. We are anticipating, we heard from the developer 2 nights ago, we are anticipating these works to be well underway this spring. And as well, road improvements, road widening of Latoria Road between Machosen Road and Sparrowhawk. And again, these works as well will be administered by Royal Bay. And the Latoria Road improvements, as defined here, those are being funded through future DCC credits. And I will pause. I do see a
Councillor
question.
Day?
Thank you. Sorry, my question, you don't need to go back to it. It occurred to me just as you flipped to this slide, but where we have in our budget the entire spend, and there is a developer contribution also being applied to that project. When you come back with those better estimates, will you share with us how much is taxpayer funded and how much is developer funded?
Absolutely, through the chair. Absolutely. I will make sure that I provide the specifics on what we were originally anticipating and where we are today with these projects.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
So moving along, that concludes the review of the road infrastructure capital budget. Now moving into facility infrastructure. So previously approved, we are seeing almost annual budgets for the Rcmp detachment upgrades. As you'll recall, during service review, we did highlight the anticipation of the Rcmp detachment upgrade. And so, like I've mentioned, those cost estimates, which initially the city's proportionate share was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $17 million. Today, we don't anticipate it will be that amount based on the change in the scope of the works. But again, this is still in very preliminary stages. We don't have estimates built into the budget. That being said, we do see requests for utilization of our police building reserve fund. Specifically this year, we're supporting some EV charging stations, washroom upgrades, and new furniture is included. The St. John and Emery Hall Church improvements. This is another area where we've referred to a contingency budget. So historically, we have maintained a $30,000 budget should facility improvements be required. You may recall last year we discussed coming out of the facilities conditional assessment that we are anticipating some upgrades required to both the kitchen and the bathroom facilities. In addition, we've identified the need for a septic field replacement at this facility. We anticipate that cost will be $40,000, and we're proposing that that be funded through the St. John's Church Reserve as well. City Hall interior retrofit. Previously, I believe we referred to it as space planning works. So these works are underway, and we have engaged a consultant that is assisting us with the space planning exercise. And we will be moving forward, looking to a reconfiguration and a retrofit construction anticipated for this year. This budget is ultimately the budget that was previously approved. It is an estimate, and we do anticipate with pending update and design comments that we'll be in a position to refine that budget. And lastly, the City Hall roof and soffit works. We've been commenting on the expectation for roof repair for at least 2 budget years now. We did not have an estimate included within our financial plan for the roof portion. This $933,000 estimate includes both funding for some soffit replacement, but also estimate for replacement of the roof here at City Hall. And I will pause if there's any questions on these city facilities.
Councillor Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if this is good money after bad, and whether at what point do we start seeking a replacement building or a move? You know, are we there yet, or is that going to be another decade? So we do need to put a roof on, or has that kind of assessment been done?
Through the chair, and we will get to this in a moment. So the city has engaged with an architect, and scoping work on the entire city facility property is well underway. And coming out of that, specifically, we'll be looking at a capital budget for the Public Works Administration building, and not currently a capital budget for that of a replacement of the City Hall facility. I can provide that comment at this time, and I don't know if our CAO wishes to provide comment further on the city facility.
Chair Kobayashi.
Mr. Earl, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Administration can return with the facility assessments that we have done on our existing buildings, including City Hall. City Hall has substantial life left in it, and major retrofits such as the roof should be built into our thinking when it comes to investing in our assets. What administration can commit to return to council to provide an overview of the City Hall facility planning moving forward, and why we're of the belief that continue to invest in this facility makes sense, at least for the near term.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Earl. Does that answer your question, Councilor Jensen? Councilor Day.
Thank you. I'm just, usually I don't see things coming at the budget where they've never been talked about with council before, but I think the City Hall roof and soffit issue certainly a surprise to me in seeing, you know, something as big as $933,000 for a roof. I guess I'm thinking that perhaps there should be some sort of a discussion to talk about, you know, is this the right direction at this time? So I'm not that I disagree with planning for a new roof, just that I feel like at budget, we're talking about numbers. We're not talking about whether we need a roof or a whole nother floor or a whole different building. So I'm just wondering how and when this discussion will take place.
Mr. Earl?
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi.
Yes.
Administration will commit to returning to council specifically on this issue in advance of going out to tender for this work. It's in my memory, I believe we had a $700,000 budget for roof repair 2 budget cycles ago. We did not include it in the last year's budget because we weren't confident in the estimate. But administration will return about the specifics of this project and which, if any, budgets it was previously disclosed in, and relative to developing confidence on council that this is the right move to move forward. We'll bring that to you before we put this project out to tender, should it remain in the budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Earl. I do recall that one. Thank you. Mr. Councilor Parkinson.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention that the slide in front of us talks about staff recommend a full building review. That's kind of what I would like to see before we go ahead with the roof, and because it may turn out to be a lot more than a roof, or it may be less. But when staff bring this back, hopefully they will have a full building review at that time.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councilor Parkinson. Okay, please proceed, Jen.
So moving along, as you'll recall, last year we purchased 2 office trailers for the Public Works yard. We are proposing a $35,000 budget for this year to fund some of the workstations that will be placed within one of these trailers. Public Works facility. So prior financial planning process about a year ago, we discussed moving forward with scoping to be followed by design and construction of a new public works facility. We have engaged with a consultant. The feasibility studies findings will be presented to council before we move forward with design and construction of this proposed facility. But this budget does reflect remaining funding for scoping works and then moving into design. And as I highlighted earlier this evening, design and construction of a new public works facility, we are proposing be debt financed.
Okay. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. It just made me think of this. Do we have a line item at all for the building that is on Two Waters or Quattro? I'm not sure what the project is called right now, and I'm still struggling to understand if the city owns that building now, or if I believe the city owns that building, but it was leased back to the developer. I'm just trying to understand how are the costs being reflected on that building, and do we have any vision of what's going on with that building from a budgetary standpoint?
Thank you. Through the chair, I can provide preliminary comment regarding to 170 Goldfinch, I believe is the civic address of that modular sales center. So from a budget standpoint, we do have a facilities conditional assessment, so some maintenance intended for that facility this year. So we have some spend planned there. The utilities related to that facility are currently being recovered under that leasing agreement, and discussions, confirmation certainly is still pending with the recent sale as to whether or not leasing will continue into the future. But there are utility costs associated with that facility that are factored into our maintenance budgets. But in recent years, since we've been under that leasing agreement, the city has not had to fund those. We have had those costs recovered through the terms of the leasing agreement.
So could I just confirm? I do not believe this would be through finance, but can I confirm that we have some sort of plan for that building, or I'm just looking at that we're looking at possibly investing in the public works facility for trailers, and we have a trailer at that Goldfinch address, and I'm trying to understand how we are best utilizing those buildings. Could someone comment on that for me, please?
Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi. And through to Mayor Martin, the waterfront visioning process is establishing a program for that park area, including infrastructure such as the building at that location. And so right now, as you're aware, the building is under lease, and it's our expectation that the incoming property owner is interested in continuing that lease. And so those conversations may begin shortly. The administration is of the belief that once a waterfront plan is complete, that plans for this particular park, including infrastructure at that park, will become clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you. So proceeding, fire hall roof repair. This was discussed and highlighted during last year's budget deliberations. This work is scheduled for 2022, and this is just a specific section of the Colwood Fire Hall. It is not the full roof, and that's why the budget estimate is the $55,000.
Okay.
Moving along, we have one new facility capital budget request, and that is for $15,000 in funding to replace the garage door on our brine production storage brine room in the Public Works facility. And I do see a question there.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I understand why it has corroded with the exposure to the salt. I'm just wondering if the new door that we're replacing it with will be better suited to that environment.
Great question through the chair. I will look to the Public Works Manager to provide comment on the specifics of the door type.
Through the chair?
Yes, please go ahead. I didn't see your hand, so go ahead.
The doors lasted almost 20 years. Yes, we will look into every option for the doors and providing the best cost for value for the infrastructure.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Boyle. Okay, let's proceed, Jen.
Thank you. So proceeding into the city's drainage infrastructure. So we have investigative works underway, both in the Allendale land area as well as the Colwood Creek Allendale land area. We're looking at storm drainage replacement in the Perenda Lane area, and that is we've had investigation in that area underway, and we're now looking at the capital replacement of that section of drainage infrastructure, and that's scheduled for 2022. I will highlight the $1 million budget for the general drainage program is a placeholder budget pending the outcome of the investigative works and ultimately what is recommended for the city to proceed in that area. So certainly further detail will come and budget refinement will follow. And I do see a question. I will pause.
Councillor Parkinson.
Jen, in our package under general drainage, 2026, you kick it up to $5.7 million. That's a scary number. Can you tell us what that's for?
Certainly. And I don't have the specifics before me, but ultimately we were looking at the outcomes of the 2018 Stormwater Master Plan and the proposed drainage works and enhancements under that program. And that is in part where that figure came from. So that was first introduced last year. But certainly I would suggest I return with detail on what is being proposed in that year.
Thank you very much, Jen.
So moving into equipment, we have a number of replacement programs. So starting in the area of our fire rescue services, both our self-contained breathing apparatus equipment, as well as our turnout gear. Previously, our turnout gear, we maintained an operating budget to support that. This budget now proposes that we utilize that operating funding to fund a reserve transfer, and will then draw from that reserve as is needed to fund the turnout gear replacement. That switch really is more of a housekeeping matter from an accounting perspective on how we should be treating that gear. And we did want to highlight for council that we are looking at a slightly higher than typical spend on turnout gear this year to fund some of the growth in the department and to ensure that we have sufficient gear for all members. IT equipment. We sometimes heard us refer to this as our evergreen budget, but we do maintain a capital expenditure plan for both workstation replacement network infrastructure replacement, and we are anticipating a spend of about $70,000 in that area. We also maintain a recurring budget for software upgrades. Should the need arise, we have the capital funding in place. We are proposing in 2022, as you've heard us discuss through service review, we are looking and exploring the options for enhancing both our timesheet solution as well as our work order solution. So to look at software that is more seamlessly integrated with some of our other softwares. And I will highlight that that work will come after the Tempest implementation works that are underway. So it will be prioritized after that. And on that note, so moving into previously approved softwares, the municipal business process software, which, as you know, we have purchased a Tempest software solution. We are well underway with configuration of that. As you heard from us previously, we were successful in receiving additional grant funding. So we were initially proceeding with this work under the COVID-19 Safe Restart. We did apply for and receive a UBCM grant to support this work because of the ultimately the development related activity that this software will help us achieve the integration of the permitting process. Moving into 2022, we'll continue with the finalization of the configuration works that are underway. So we've got calls for service. We have a business licensing module that's underway. And then of course, all of the related development permitting. So building permitting, engineering permitting, and development services permitting. So those works are well underway. And then in addition, we have our property taxation module. So the look and feel of our property tax notices will change when we get that portion of the work implemented. Moving forward, we do have a placeholder budget proposed for 2023 that may or may not be utilized. We will hear more about that as we get through the initial configuration works, but that 2023 budget is relating to that of bylaw ticketing and whether or not the city chooses to proceed with some of those software solutions. As well, the enhanced web interface. And so ultimately getting that interactivity on the city's website. So a My City that you've heard us refer to before, where you can log on and see the status of property tax accounts, that web interaction for permitting, taxation, and so on. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded. 2 equipment items that were previously approved. We are looking to replace one of our message board trailers next year, 2023. Similarly, the radio antenna mast at the fire hall. We first mentioned this last year, and that is scheduled for next year, 2023. I will pause for questions or I will proceed.
Just a quick question, Jen, just on that municipal business process software. So is there operating costs also associated with that? Like it's 300,000 capital. Do we need extra people all of a sudden to manage this, or are we seeing all the costs here?
Thank you. Great question. No, you are not seeing all the costs here. You are just seeing the direct capital costs. The increased, you may recall at the first budget meeting, I spoke about the need whenever we have new capital, it's always important that we capture any increased operating costs. And so we had an increase approximately $30,000, and the bulk of that is related to increased maintenance software licensing associated with this solution. The staffing component is certainly a more involved discussion. You'll recall in recent service reviews, the city, we did increase our IT staffing component to help ensure, project delivery. I mean, these software configurations, installations, and ultimately the delivery of this multi-year project does require extensive resources. That's to get the project introduced, configured, implemented at the city, but then there's absolutely the ongoing support for that. And so currently we are working with existing teams to support this software solution. But you did hear from us during service review. We spoke briefly about proposed resourcing for enhanced GIS support in the area of engineering. And we spoke a little about enhanced resourcing for some additional support. I mean, more so in the area of asset management. So kind of the previous two softwares I was referring to, and how we can really ramp up support in that area. But specific to this software, the business process, it is a land-based system. And so it does introduce the need to recognize the resourcing to ensure maintenance of this cross-departmental software solution, which is new for the city. And so we are currently exploring those needs right now and working with all of the teams involved right now.
Okay, you sort of answered my question, but okay, let's just proceed here.
Moving into new equipment budgets. So we are looking at a replacement for a 15-year-old hot water pressure washer. That is $15,000 estimate spend for this year. We are looking at a security system upgrade. We spoke about this briefly during service review. So that's a spend anticipated for this year. Ultimately, both the fob key scanning system that we utilize here at City Hall and Public Works are aged and they are in need of replacement. Lastly, we're looking at an attachment, a snowblower attachment for one of our pieces of equipment. And we anticipate that spend at $14,000.
Okay.
In addition, moving into 2023, we're looking at an upgrade to the city's website. So the website we currently have, that was designed in 2013. It's on a platform that really is no longer supported. So staff recognize the need to get this upgrade in place. We are proposing utilization of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant to support this work. And that is scheduled for next year. We're anticipating that. Configuration and implementation of an enhanced GIS enterprise software solution. So that in part relates to some of the enhanced GIS servicing that you've heard us discuss during recent service review. We are proposing that for next year. And lastly, we're looking at an equipment budget for next year to support for the tracking of our city fleet usage, to provide us with better, more specific information on what folks are using, what fleet, so that we can better cost that information and just provide that much more information, both from a financial planning, asset management stance, but also as we talk about the costs of our service delivery. And I will pause. I do see a
Mayor
question.
Martin.
Thank you. In regards specifically to the website, why, since this is coming out of COVID restart funding, why are we pushing it to 2023 and not looking at moving forward with this year? That's my first question. Then my second question is, and this would be specifically through the finance department, if we upgraded our website, would we be able to begin to take payments, for example, our municipal taxes, through the website?
Through the chair, great question. So to answer the first part of your question, in part, we're prioritizing existing works that are underway. So the Tempest implementation
Suck up everything.
is absolutely demanding staff time and resources. That said, I don't want to conclude that the website upgrade couldn't occur this year. I would certainly need to speak. This is both, an initiative that will be supported by our IT resourcing as well as our communications teams. So I can't directly answer whether or not that could occur sooner. And then the second question, yes, we are anticipating that we will be able to accept tax payments online, and that's tied to the Tempest works. So specifically, I don't expect, and I do see our IT manager who's going to jump in to provide better clarity, but that will be coming likely next year, not for this year. But I will turn it over to our IT manager, Mark.
If you can join in.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mayor, and through the chair. In 2022 with Tempest, what our plan was, we've been working sort of on the base module, all the foundational stuff, and in 2022 we'll be adding credit cards, sort of an e-commerce platform, My City, which is for the public to log in and have the interaction with their accounts with the city. And then also our city module where anyone can see development activity, and some e-apply modules as well for business licensing, and also for being able to put calls for service in. So all that's planned for the second half of 2022. So that's part of the budget for Tempest this year.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a follow-up question, if I may, Chair.
Please, Mayor.
So can I assume that the Tempest work is a precursor to the website, or these two projects cannot run parallel? And specifically, the reason I asked that question is, at least the last time when it went out in 2013, we had an external firm do majority of the design work, and it was just communications on the visuals of how the website operated. Are we planning on doing a lot of the behind the scenes work on this website in-house?
You have an answer to that, Sandra. Your hand is up, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. It is, from my perspective, desirable that we get the Tempest solution in place prior to doing the website upgrades, simply because it will generate a lot of user interfaces that we have not had in the past, and we'll want to integrate those seamlessly into our new design. Having said that, there's a lot of steps that we can put in place this year. I anticipate it will be an external consultant group, again, who helps us with this upgrade to improve navigation, responsiveness, accessibility, as well as integrate these user interfaces. So some of that groundwork we can put in place this year in preparation for it all to come together beautifully in 2023. That's the plan.
Thanks very much, Sandra.
Thank you.
Yeah, from what I understand, the intel on Tempest is it's going to bring us to our knees there, Mr. Downton. So very concerned about that. So yeah. Okay, let's proceed. I don't see any other hands, questions. Are you finished, Mayor Martin? You're okay?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Jen.
So moving into our fleet capital budget, a number of scheduled replacements that were previously approved. As you'll recall, we've been outfitting our fire fleet with the mobile mapping data units, and we do have, I believe it's tanker 58 scheduled for this year. We're recommending to replace our tandem gravel truck, unit 48, with a smaller version. This was originally scheduled for 2021. It has been deferred to this year. Dump truck 53, we have a scheduled replacement for this year. We have a number of pickup trucks that are scheduled for replacement, and this is all in accordance with our fleet replacement policy, as you'll recall, that we've brought forth. And lastly, we are looking at a new electric truck for our parks service area. This was previously approved, and as you can see, there was a delivery delay on the 2021 contract award. So we've carried forward the funding necessary for that contract award.
Just a quick question, Jen. What happens when we replace an asset like the vehicles? There's probably on the books, there's no residual value, but do we trade them in and get something back for them, or what happens? Do we put them on auction, and what happens to the funds when we do this?
Great question. If there is a trade-in amount realized, and typically when we do trade them in, these assets are at their end of their useful life, so there's no value on the books anymore from an accounting perspective. And so that gain on the trade-in, we do have policy in place that sees us set that funding aside within the specific fleet reserve or fleet or equipment reserve
It
fund.
makes sense. Thank you. That's good.
So moving into new fleet budgets, we are proposing a replacement for Fleet 78. This is the sport utility vehicle utilized by the Bylaw team. We are looking to replace this vehicle with a zero emission equivalent, which is why that budget has been increased over what we were initially considering, just factoring in our expectations of moving to a zero emission equivalent. We are proposing 2 electric pickup trucks for utilization by our public works team. And that's being proposed for 2022. And lastly, a van for purposes of irrigation. So last year, we had a budget in place, about less than half of this amount, to purchase a slide-in work box. And ultimately, we did not utilize that funding. Feedback from our parks team was that a dedicated van would be more effective with service delivery in this area. And so we're moving forward with a budget proposal for that. We'll pause if there's any questions on these items.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not fussed about the replacement vehicles. I think we've talked about this in the past, that replacement, there's a program of when it might happen, and it happens when they're worn out and it's time to get rid of them. So I'll certainly leave that to staff to decide if there's miles left on any of these vehicles or not. I do notice there were a total of 4 new vehicles, and I don't think we hired that many new people. So maybe some explanation on that. And also just to confirm, when we buy electric vehicles, do we also purchase a charger for them? Like, do we have to have the plug-in chargers in the works yard for each of these? And is that cost included in the budgets?
Great questions.
Doyle, would you like to, or Jen, can you
I can
answer that?
provide preliminary comment, and then I'll absolutely turn it over to our public works manager. We do have a number of EV charging stations at the public works facility, but you're correct. As our EV fleet grows, we will need to consider the need for additional charging stations. These budgets do not currently consider the need for additional charging stations. There was another question you'd asked, and it's escaped my mind.
Well, it was just about the 4 new vehicles versus how many more staff we've hired.
Certainly, I'll look to see if staff has comment for that, or will return with information.
Mr. Boyle?
Yes, through the chair. We will return with the specifics to that comment in regard to number of staff and number of vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hepting, let's move it along.
Okay, so moving into our parks, trails, and recreation infrastructure, you'll recall the Murray's Pond Boardwalk. So design works complete, and we are moving forward with the anticipation of construction this year. And we are proposing that we fund this this community amenity with our community amenity reserve fund. Some new parks, trails, or recreation related infrastructure. You received a recent update from the team at the February 7th committee meeting that was endorsed just earlier this week. So we are proposing utilization of community amenity funding at an estimate of $500,000. So this specifically would see the city fund the capital works related to sport court at Dunsmir Middle School, and would see the district maintaining responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of that. In addition, we're looking at a feasibility study this year for a Royal Bay Recreation Center. And lastly, earlier this week, you received some of the background information. So coming out of the park management plans for each of Colwood Creek Park, Lookout Lake, and Ocean View, there was a number of capital works that were initially proposed for 2023 to 25. And so the financial plan has incorporated the initial estimates on those works. And I do want to highlight, it may have caught your eye, right now, based on the proposed spend, we are looking at a deficit in our general capital reserve. Yeah. We do not anticipate to utilize this reserve over the course of these park improvements. We are exploring alternate funding sources, including potential grants, also the establishment, as you're aware, of the Parks DCC funding, which will not provide funding in the initial years, but certainly in future years. And I will pause. I see multiple
Councilor
hands.
Parkinson.
Thank you. And of course, after I put my hand up, she answered half my question about the Parks DCC. So once again, Jen is way ahead of me. Well, that's no surprise to anybody. But the other thing, the question I had, in 2022, we're looking at the Dunsmir Sport Court budget, $500,000, and the park improvements for Colwood Creek and Ocean View and the like are sort of pushed off in the future. And yet it would seem to me that we're a lot further down the road on deciding what to do in Colwood Creek Park and Ocean View and the like than we are with Dunsmir. I guess the question is, why do people really think we're going to get from essentially a couple of paragraphs is describing what could be done at Dunsmir to full construction this year? Seems like a bit of a stretch to me.
Any comments from staff on this?
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ian.
Yes, so there have been preliminary discussions between city staff and school district staff. The belief is that it could be carried out within 2022. Really, the scope of the sports court upgrades are relatively minor in terms of the details that would need to be hammered out relative to the park improvements that are proposed in a conceptual form through the individual park plan. So the hope is that it can be accomplished in 2022, and that's where that's what initial discussions suggest is possible.
So I guess the other half of my question, if I may, Chair, is that how we want to place our priorities? Would we? I mean, happy to see it. Good to come. But we've obviously got other park priorities that maybe people are more anxious to see done than Dunsmir. That's I don't know. I guess that's probably a question for the other members of council. But otherwise, I guess we'll leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Do you wish to make a motion so it can be discussed, Councilor Parkinson?
Well, no, as I said, if there's other members of council that have that believe there's merit to this, I mean, maybe everybody likes the Dunsmir Sports Court as being the best project. I'm okay, not necessarily arguing against it. It does seem to me we're further down the road on the other ones. But if there's a clamoring of support to do something, I'll probably chime in. But otherwise, we can move on.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm about to comment on exactly what Councillor Parkinson was just speaking about, and I struggle with this, specifically the Dunsmir Middle School sports cart, when we are struggling to continue to get the skateboard park built. And I would, I guess, if I had $500,000 to spend right now, I think I may be rather choosing to get the skateboard park built this year versus the Dunsmir sports court. I know we're waiting on grant applications and that, but it seems like we've been waiting on that for years. Could staff comment, would the skateboard park qualify under the Community Amenities Reserve?
Through the chair, yes, we do expect that facility, that those infrastructure works would qualify. Some of our community amenity funding is restricted to very specific purposes, but much of it is not. And so to directly answer your question, yes, I do anticipate that there would be community amenity funding, certainly in excess of the $99,000 that's currently committed based on previous direction.
Could you also comment, and I guess any staff member could, I don't specifically recall this discussion, and that doesn't say it didn't happen. It's just I don't specifically recall us discussing this at any level. Was this a priority of council that was directed, or was this a staff suggestion of where this money should be spent?
Thank you. Through the chair, I can provide initial comment, and then I expect Ian Borhill can provide much more. This is really recent direction. So we brought forth a Parks and Recreation Master Plan implementation that was just resolved by council earlier this week.
Monday.
And so included within that resolve was the Dunsmir hard surface project for 2022. And the proposed park improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day.
I just wonder, I feel very similarly to the previous speakers on the school sport court for a couple of reasons. One is that it is usable right now by members of the committee as a tennis court or any activity that you could do on a paved surface. And I realize that it's not in great shape anymore. However, the park improvements are totally within our control, and the issue raised about the skate park, well, I agree. I love the idea of the skate park, and I'm highly supportive of it, but it's a little more problematic, I believe, at West Shore Parks and Rec because we're not the sole funder or the sole owner. So if we're the sole funder of the skate park, I don't know how we would ever recover any matching portion. Perhaps I don't have that correct, but perhaps staff could explain what the difference between building something on school board property would be versus building something on West Shore Parks and Rec lands.
Go ahead, Mr. Borhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll maybe go back to the previous question about where the Dunsmir multi-sport court idea came from. So council may recall a joint meeting with the City Council and School Board held on November 24th. And so this was one of 3 projects that were proposed by school district staff and board members. The others being a school, Royal Bay Secondary School sports box, as well as a Royal Bay Elementary School field and parking lot upgrade. So this is in line with the joint memorandum with the school district, and there would be an agreement in place as to how public access and maintenance and replacement costs would be co-managed between the city and the school district, whereas amenities built at the West Shore Parks and Rec facility would be managed by West Shore Parks and Rec through our existing ownership agreement. Any additional detail on that, I would have to return to committee with the results of some research.
Jen, just to clarify something for me. Is this something that we were going to discuss on March 1st, like just the prioritization, or did you want to do that during this information session? Can you just clarify that with me before, I decide on what my next action is here?
Certainly, if committee wishes to make a recommendation tonight, by all means, please do so. That being said, we are introducing these draft budgets for the first time tonight, which is why we have time set aside at a future meeting, March 1st. At that point, committee will have been introduced to the budget in its entirety, and we can certainly revisit if there's a desire to reprioritize works, shuffle budgets around.
Okay, thanks very much, Jen. Councillor Parkinson, would you reconsider bringing this up at the March 1st meeting? And you may have a motion in order here then?
Sure, yep, that's fine.
Okay, well, so I'm going to let Jen proceed. Great comments, great questions. Councillor Day, are you okay with that also?
I am. I just wanted to be more specific in that if at March 1st, when staff come back, perhaps they could have looked into the things that we've just discussed, including the skate park, the sport court, and the park improvements.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you very much for that comment. Are you okay with that, Jen?
Yes, noted.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move forward then, Jen.
And so with that, I'll take a quick minute and just recap. So we will return. March 1st is the next scheduled meeting. Committee will be introduced to the sewer operating budget, as well as the related sewer utility special initiatives, sewer capital works. We'll also return with comment where possible on a couple of the action items that were discussed tonight. So specifically, the West Shore Parks and Rec related skate park initiative will provide some further comment there. The Dunsmir School Sport Court, as well as the capital works that were initially proposed for those first 3 years under those parks plans that Council recently provided recommendation on. We'll also get into a discussion about our reserves, specifically how we're funding those reserves, where the restrictions are. And as well, the intention is that March 1st, you will see the implications of the recommendations made at the last February 8th meeting. As you recall, committee was introduced to a potential property tax increase overall, 5.48%. That percentage has dropped, and we will look at the details of that on March 1st. Right. It's our intention that coming out of the March 1st meeting, committee will have made recommendations on if there are any other changes you wish to see in this draft financial plan. Staff can then make those changes. We are scheduled to return to council chambers for consideration of the financial plan bylaw on March 14th. Right. And that concludes what we had scheduled for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen. Great job tonight. And Councillor Parkinson, are you moving to adjourn, or do you have another comment?
Sorry, I was just going to ask if probably March 1st, if Jen could walk us through the implications of the debt financing that's been proposed in a couple of places. I don't know if that's March 1st or a different meeting, but I think we need some coaching on that.
Absolutely. Through the chair. If it's not March 1st, it will be March 14th, but it's really important that we walk through those implications, especially what steps we need to take initially, and then as well as what the implications are on our operating budget as we start to service that debt in future years.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor Day?
I will move adjournment.
Right on. Thank you very much. Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much, everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Everyone.
And I,